So, thank you so much for your time today. I'm very excited actually today to talk to you and ask you all the questions I have all these years in mind. Also, the reason because I've cited you for my MBA and PhD dissertation. So there you go. We have this relationship, that of course you might not know earlier, but now you do. So I'm very excited and honored that you have given me time today to talk to me about all the things which are coming up next. Welcome, Professor Mark Saunders, to this episode of research methods and knowing how to do research and beyond that as well. So, my first question to you would be just very basic, because of course we all know you from your books and your articles and the rest of the things, but I really want to know, um, your background. Just tell us about your background. How have you joined academia, and what's the story behind that?
Okay, thank you very much, Serene. I actually started life doing an undergraduate degree in geography.
Oh,
And then from there, I went and did a master's in urban study, followed by a PhD in geography, which is actually on labour migration. So you can sort of start to see a little bit of management linking into that, perhaps.
yeah.
Then, for the first 5 years after my PhD, I worked in local government, where I started life as a planner, building forecasting models, because my PhD was actually mainly statistical modelling. And
Okay.
after about 3 years, I started to do work in social services and, in
Right.
particular, working with social workers to review and inform their practice. And I discovered that the statistical type research and questionnaires didn't really work. So
Mm,
basically taught myself to do qualitative research and worked with them for a couple of years and then moved into academia. From
right.
there, getting a job at what was then called Cheltenham and Gloucester College of Higher Education. It's not a name that
Right.
trips off the tongue. And that is now the University of Gloucestershire. I was there for 10 years and I started off by teaching predominantly statistics, managing information type things.
Right.
And over time, I moved more into teaching HRM and dissertation management and research methods and headed up a research centre in HRM. I'd been there for about 10 years and then I moved to Oxford Brookes to be a reader in research methods. So by then, I actually was starting to build a reputation in research methods.
Right.
And after about 3 or 4 years at Oxford Brookes, I became associate dean for research,
Right.
where I
Right.
stayed at Brookes for about 10 years, and then moved to the University of Surrey,
Okay.
where I was initially employed to, for want of a better word, sort out research methods teaching and do
All
my own
right.
research.
Okay.
And after a couple of years, I then took over looking after the PhD program at Surrey. After
Right.
5 years at Surrey, I moved to University of Birmingham, where I've been ever since, which is about 9 years now. And
Okay.
during the time there, I've taught nothing but research methods, almost entirely to doctoral students and some to master students.
Right.
And I've been a director of the PhD program and also director of global engagement. So that's taken you through about 35 years of academic career and 5 years in local government, plus a
Wow.
PhD, plus a PhD
Wow.
as well.
Wow. Wow. Okay. But of course, you have taken us through like this 35 years in
Yeah,
just few minutes. But of course, from day one, things are not going to be the same,
no.
like they are today. So, what has been some challenges you might have faced early on?
Oh, some challenges. Let me just think that through quite carefully. I think if you're looking at academic challenges, I still
Yeah.
think the biggest and toughest challenge is being told a research idea you've got which you're really pleased with, and somebody says, "Oh, that's rubbish," or "That's very obvious," because you spend a lot of time thinking up, you become very excited by it, and somebody then tells you that it's not a very good idea.
Yeah.
So that's quite a challenge. And another
Mm.
challenge has been when when you've had a paper reviewed and it's been accepted by a good journal or a
Yeah.
journal which people like, and then somebody says, well, it's not a very good paper after all, and you're very pleased with the way you've written it. So those are
Mm.
sort of challenges I think I face. And I suppose the biggest challenge of all is time management and finding enough time
Yeah.
to do everything.
Yeah, exactly. And so how have you tackled that? I mean, especially time management in your field, where, of course, there's teaching, there's research, there's so many more things
Oh,
which a layperson won't know if they have not worked in academia, because there's just 100 more things you have to
I
do.
mean, I think with academia, you can always do more. And
Mm.
you could, and there's always something you could be doing if you wanted to. So you can prepare your class, or you can prepare your class better, or you can think, oh, I could do that, and you can add to it.
Yeah,
Or in research, there's all you can always spend more time on polishing a paper and doing things.
yeah.
And it's so I would say initially I started off by the first institution at Cheltenham and Gloucester was very much a teaching institution. So there, my big challenge in time management was to actually get my classes
Mm,
prepared because I was teaching
mm.
550 hours a year then and trying to write
Wow.
research papers. And I think the thing was I just worked and I didn't do a lot else. I can remember looking at the car mileage, and when I moved from local government into academia, the mileage on my car halved, even though my journey to work was longer. So I just didn't do anything else. Not very good and awful for work-life balance. There's no doubt about it.
Mm, mm.
Subsequently, I've got better at managing time. There's no, in some ways, but I think my emphasis on work has not been to the benefit of my family in the long term. So I don't think I did it right.
Right, right. Okay, and that's very interesting you say that, and perhaps
Mm,
something we can learn something from as well,
mm,
especially for somebody who is starting their career in academia now, to hear from somebody like you who
mm,
has been in academia all their life.
mm.
Or do you always wanted to be in academia?
Not really. I started off, I toyed with going into the army and then
Okay,
decided I didn't want to when I went to the selection at Sandhurst and said I didn't like it.
right.
And then I trained to be a school teacher and
Okay,
did that for a term's teaching practice and thought, nope, it's not for me. And then I went back and did a PhD instead. The local government job was interesting for 5 years, but I found I got bored with what I was doing because there's quite a lot of repeat work. And so academia, I've never been bored in. I think that's the biggest one of the big things. It's been fantastic to be doing it and have something which is interesting, be able to pursue new ideas. And
yeah,
literally, you're very incredibly blessed in academia because we work with really bright people, and and if you get it right when you teach them or discussing things, they get excited by the ideas as well. So I think it's
absolutely, absolutely.
fantastic.
Very, very well said. And talking about ideas, of course, you have so many projects going on.
Yeah.
Anything very exciting you're working on right now?
Oh, yes. I mean, I've got a number of things at the moment which I'm working, which I think is really fun. One of them is a paper on philosophical reporting, which you will know, and I think most people listening to this podcast will know that when you start reading academic journals, they very, very rarely tell you the
Yeah,
way they're looking at the world, their research philosophy,
yeah.
or as I would call it, theologies. And it's been trying to understand. I'm working with a lovely colleague called Natasha Mountner up in Fussell, and we've been trying
Mm,
to look at what gets reported and what doesn't, and why, and also noting that it's very poorly reported. So
mm,
we see things that the majority of papers are absent in talking about philosophy. Then they might just report it to say what it is, but they don't explain how it links to the research. And then the ones which seem to do it best, they actually apply it to that particular research project. So we looked at that and started to think, well, how can we explain it in terms of teaching and learning? Hence, we got a mnemonic area, which fits those points I just put there, in terms of absent, reported, explained, and applied. So it's area, which is quite a nice way of remembering
yeah,
it. But I found that very helpful in the teaching. But now we're working up a paper for that at the moment on philosophical reporting. So that's one
right.
thing I'm working on at the moment. Then
Okay,
I've been doing some work on later life entrepreneurs, one of my former doctoral students,
right,
Sened Jabali, who now works at Liverpool, and then also work on distrust in organisations,
right.
in particular distrust in organisations like consultancy firms. And there I've been working with another former doctoral student called Nivab Geller. And then the other big
Okay,
project I'm working on is with a colleague in the politics department at Birmingham, Nicholas Wheeler. And Nick and I have been looking with one of Nick's former doctoral students, Chiara. And what we've been looking there is looking at the role of distrust dissolving in nuclear arms negotiations.
right. Wow.
So there's
Wow,
but
that is
there's
exciting.
it's really exciting there. So some really fun projects going on at the moment.
Yeah,
And then there's
yeah.
also a couple of more writing projects. Like we've got an edited book with some friends. One Keith Townsend, who works at Griffith in Australia, and Rebecca Loudon, who works there, and then Emily Morrison, who works in the States. We've got a book with How to Keep Your Doctorate on Track, which is an edited book, which we're just doing. We just started to do a second edition of that. So there's lots of fun
Right.
projects on the go.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that book definitely is going to help many people who are doing the PhDs now, perhaps thinking about doing a PhD going forward,
Yeah,
isn't
yeah.
it? So picking on what you just said about the article about
Mm,
philosophical reporting,
yes.
because I completely agree, because not many of us academics
Mm,
would report on the lens through
mm,
which we are looking at the world, and that, of
yeah.
course, can impact the results. Uh, do you think there are any kind of misconceptions about, therefore, in academia, which you would like to clarify, which you like to talk about?
What in terms of philosophies?
philosophers or the academic research or the way academia works?
I
I
think
mean, for a
the
layperson who doesn't know how academia works.
I think one of it's not so much a misconception, but I think what I find is that people tend to take one view of the world rather than recognizing there are alternative views. So that would be nice to
Mm.
actually see more of that and to understand. The other misconception I think, which is coming through hard and strong, is that Gen AI, in relation to Gen AI, one,
Yeah,
it shouldn't be used, which I think is very foolish because it's there and it will be used. So let's actually look at how do we use it well. And secondly, the fact that people actually believe it without
yeah,
looking at it critically. So I think we've got a
yeah.
massive, I think as academics, we've got a massive role to work with our students to enable them to become more critical of what they do. And it's a very big
Mm.
change in doing
It's
that. We've tried to
humongous.
get those skills to them, but it's not just knowing how to press the buttons. In fact, that's minor. I mean, obviously you need to know how to write um, a prompt to Gen AI, but the crucial thing is also actually being able to read what it said and actually say, does that make sense? And
Yeah.
actually, so look at it with a critical eye skill. So,
Absolutely. And actually, you already have mentioned Gen AI. So I think that pretty much is a really good segue to my next question, which
mm,
is how do we see academia changing in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think academia has already changed massively. I mean, it was COVID was a watershed for academia in that it changed the way that we had to teach in the short term, and I don't think we're ever going to go back to exactly as we were. Personally, I think there's quite a few problems with doing things online in that people have, like, whilst they've learnt to be passively involved in learning teaching online, they haven't doing active learning online is not easy, and I think students find it difficult, and they're not quite as engaged as they were in many
Mm,
cases. Having said that, I've had some amazing classes where they've been completely engaged. So I think there's a whole thing to think through very carefully on the use of Gen AI and how
mm,
we, but also how we teach online. I think that's the biggest
mm.
thing that we've got to get to grips with, and to actually recognise that whereas 15, 20 years ago we had students who were full time, who really were full time.
Yeah,
Now most of our students they may be studying full time on paper, but most of them are having to work to keep going.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
so we have to think of ways to enable them to work, and hence why online becomes helpful because they can study at the time that's suitable for them. But how do
Absolutely.
we then build up the skills which are needed in the workplace of actually being able to interact with other people well, and especially
Yeah,
do that online?
absolutely. And I think that really makes me think also at times, and I often think, well, since it's changing so much, and as you quite rightly said,
Mm,
it has changed already.
mm,
What are the trends, perhaps somebody like me who is, new in academia, what trends do
mm.
I need to follow, perhaps and pay attention? Or anybody who's coming now in academia and wants to make a difference?
Right. There is a massive drive for impact and relevance in
Yeah.
what we do.
Mm.
And part of me says that's a good thing. Part of me is quite worried about that because there's quite a lot of things which have come out of research which nobody knew that were going to be in their use. You just have to think of post-it sticky notes.
Yeah.
Nobody knew that a glue that didn't stick would be so useful.
Yeah.
And so I think to actually just do only stuff that is completely relevant to the now is wrong. I think the other trend people coming in now is to recognize that the skills you have to be continually updated
Mm. Yeah.
and you can't
Absolutely.
stand still. So I was just thinking back today because I was writing something for a presentation
Yeah.
and about how much research skills have changed in the last 25 years in with the use of, first of all, the use of laptops and computers. I can remember teaching students how to use a mouse. Yeah,
Wow.
so that gives you an idea of how, and actually
Yes.
having laboratories where they met a spreadsheet for the first time. You see what's happened now. I mean, it's just norms. So
Yeah.
the use of technology has changed, but what hasn't changed is the need to understand what the output is you're getting and be able to interpret it. Not necessarily be able to interpret it perfectly, but know enough to be
Mm.
able to say, "Hang on, this doesn't make sense."
Mm.
And so
Mm.
that I
Mm.
think, and if anything, I think that skill is much more important now than it used to be because before you had to work the statistics out or the
Yeah.
qualitative data interpretation yourself. Whereas now you can just go into Gen AI and say, "Here's my transcript of 10 interviews. Tell me what it means." But you
Yeah.
don't know how it
Exactly.
gets there,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that to me is the most scary thing because if you can't explain how you get to it,
Yeah.
how do you
The
know it's
critical
right or not?
thinking. Yeah.
Yeah,
Therefore, the
exactly.
critical thinking is going to be missing now.
Mm, mm,
Yeah, yeah. So, of course, we have spoken about initially when I started talking about the challenges or how
Mm,
you have started your career. But in all these 35 years, which is a long of a time, um, what has
mm.
been the biggest challenge, if there was any, which perhaps you can pinpoint and can say, well, yeah, that was the biggest challenge of my whole academic
Oh
life.
gosh, I'm not so much a challenge, but I think the thing which I suppose we've talked about time management, so I'll park that
Yeah,
one. That's
yeah,
always a challenge. But I think the thing which I find is that you never ever compare yourself with people like yourself. You always compare yourself with people better and don't think you're good enough. And there's
yeah.
this massive imposter syndrome. Why would people want to listen to? I'm always minded. I get off the train at Birmingham University to walk down to my office in the business school. I walk past a building called the Learning Centre. Now, I'm going to forget the fact that I don't believe learning only occurs in a centre. I think it
Mm.
occurs everywhere. But
Yeah,
on the engraved into the building are all people who've had Nobel Prizes who worked at Birmingham. And you look and you think, how
wow.
on earth did I get a job here?
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think we all are very bad at looking at how well we've done. And what we tend to do is look at how well we haven't done
yeah.
compared to people who are better. So that I think is the biggest challenge. And I think it's a challenge which new academics have. And I think however far along you go in your career, there's always people who are better and you always think you're not going to be good enough.
Yeah, that's such a, I think, such a timely thing and relevant and
Mm,
so well said because that's what we see around and we feel
mm,
all the time.
mm.
And also the imposter syndrome always kicks in, right? Where you think, oh my God, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not good. I'm not good enough,
good
actually.
enough. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing.
Mm,
Yeah. Thanks very much for sharing that because I think if we can hear somebody like you
mm.
saying that, we can relate more.
I think it's very interesting. What happened the other week, sorry, I was doing some work in university in South Africa, and we were talking about publications, and we were talking
Yeah,
about thinking about which journals to publish in and why.
yeah,
And all the people in the audience were new researchers.
yeah,
And I said, how many of you are aiming to publish in an A-class journal or four-star journal?
yeah,
And everybody put their hands up.
yeah.
So I then said to them, I said, I've got about X number of publications. Let's say I use the word number 100. How many four-star publications do you think I've got? And I said, I said, so I just shout them out. We were getting 30, 40, 50. I said seven.
Wow.
And you see, I don't think people realize early on what they're aiming for. And it's
Yeah,
very easy to aim high and miss.
yeah,
And
yeah, indeed.
there's a need to be realistic. And I don't think it helps the people being told you have to have this to get on,
No, no.
especially at some universities which have teaching focus. So let's focus on what we're good at. Personally, I
Yeah,
think teaching is the most important thing we do in our jobs.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm glad somebody said that. So talking about that, um, have you
Mm.
ever thought in your career or life overall that at any point there was something which you could not do the best to your ability, perhaps a failure maybe, or where you thought that it wasn't a successful effort?
Oh, loads. I mean, I've got so many rejection letters. I call those are
Really?
obviously failures. Yeah, I've got loads. And I think, you show me an academic who tells me you haven't got a rejection letter. I'll show you an academic who's never published a paper. I think it's
Yeah,
that's part of it. So, and every time you get a rejection letter, it's because you put a lot of time into your papers, you believe in it, you think it's
yeah.
wonderful, and then I mean, I had a desk reject for a paper recently, which I was yeah, and I thought, oh,
Wow.
and I had a conference paper rejected a while ago. And I thought, good grief, I thought it's a good idea, but that's how it goes. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
sometimes it comes good in the end. If you look at the feedback, sometimes you think, I mean, if you look at the feedback immediately, you think, ooh, I don't like that. You get quite grumpy, and then you go back to it
yeah.
a week later, you think, yeah, there's a point there.
Yeah, yeah, but then how do you handle with that stress or the pressure which comes with that, or perhaps even with that failure? How do you handle that? Because it's really hard. I've been through something similar, and I don't want to look at my work for a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah,
I don't
well, I
want to go
don't.
back to it.
Well, I always have two or three projects on the go at once.
Right.
So
Okay.
I've got other things I can be working on. And I have things which I know will be a success because, like, if you're writing a book chapter,
Yeah.
pretty certain you're going to get that it was going to be published, provided you don't do something really awful. It'll be blind reviewed, yes, but
Yes.
you
Yeah.
you'll reasonably like to get it in, so that helps. And
Right.
then the other thing is I work with colleagues, so when you get a nasty review back, you can sit with somebody and say "Brrr," together and get angry together, and then you
Yeah.
can look at it together and say, yeah, okay, that made sense because, and then move on together.
Right, right. Yeah, okay. Well, I think yeah, that maybe that yeah, that helps. But I guess there's so many emotions,
Mm,
with your work, you're attached so much because as you said, you spent days and night and thinking and
mm,
conducting that research that it sometimes really, really gets hard. So on that note, based on your experience and your reflections,
mm.
what do you see, or perhaps what would you suggest to people who are joining academia now, and what kind of qualities they should have if they are considering to join academia?
Um, Perseverance, the ability to
Okay.
learn, because I think it's in learning. One of my former colleagues who I love dearly, Phil, like we wrote the research methods book together. Phil always said it's about inhabiting the world of ideas. And I think that's a lovely way of putting it. I think it's a beautiful
Yes.
phrase there. But
Yeah.
I suppose the other thing is that we get given a lot of freedom in academia to do what we want, providing we hit
Mm,
what the university wants. And I'm very much of the opinion that the universities pay us, compared to most people, pretty well to
mm,
do a job where they give us a lot of freedom. So
yeah.
I think it's important that we teach the students to the best of our abilities,
Mm,
and we also deliver what the university wants in terms of research outputs.
sure.
And
Yeah.
once we've done what they need, then we've got the space to do what we want to do as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
personally think delivering the teaching is great fun anyway. I like doing the research.
Yeah.
I sometimes don't really want to aim at some of the journals because I don't think it's appropriate, but I know that the university needs certain sorts of publications, just like the
Mm,
research income, and
yeah.
that's part of what you sign up to do.
Yeah. Yeah. True. So if you have to pinpoint the qualities of any potential academic, what those qualities would be?
Perseverance,
Yeah.
enjoy working with people and stimulating minds, attention to detail,
Yeah.
and an ability to stand up and communicate in front of students.
Mm, yeah. That's very
And
important.
and crucially, I think an ability to write, or rather, let's
Yeah.
say no, let's change that. Ability to rewrite.
Yeah. I like that. I'm going to use it now. Ability to rewrite. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we don't
Okay.
we don't write papers, we rewrite them. And I suppose
Absolutely.
it comes into that is an ability to accept criticism.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely, you're right. You're right. But and so since I've asked you the question about people who are considering to join academia now, perhaps the qualities, um, when you were starting your academic life, your academic career, if you have to go back now and give
Mm.
yourself a piece of advice in that
Yeah,
time, what that would be?
do what you want, do what you enjoy, and do
Yeah,
it as well as you can.
do what you enjoy and do it as well as you can. Okay.
And that's part one. There's two parts to this.
Yeah.
And remember who pays the bills and meet their needs. Because they
Very
pay us.
honest. Yeah,
They pay us. And I think the other part
absolutely.
to remember who pays the bills, in every single university in the world, the vast majority of money comes from teaching students well. And I
Mm.
think as academics in teaching students, we have an amazing privilege, but I also think we can change people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we will do more, have more impact by teaching students well and being there for students than
Yeah,
we'll have been doing anything else.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So is that how then you continue to grow in your profession and you continue to be motivated? What is your secret of staying motivated?
It's exciting. I enjoy it, and I like people, and I like doing. I think research methods is really interesting topic and subject
Yeah.
area. It didn't exist as a discipline when I
Mm,
started. I think it does now,
mm,
and
mm.
it's something
Yeah.
which I enjoy teaching. I enjoy finding out new things. I'm always thinking of new ways to try and teach things as well.
Yeah, yeah, but now where you have achieved so much and you are a world-renowned author and people know you through your books and your work, um, has it ever hit you that how successful you are? And what does that mean to you?
Oh, that is a really good question. It hit me that I might have done something when I was at a conference in Northern Ireland in Derry, and
Yeah.
somebody said, "Are you Mark Saunders?" I said, "Well, I'm one of them." They said, "No, are you the Mark Saunders?" That was a bit scary. And I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Did you do that book with the onion in it?" I said, "Yes." And then they said, "Oh, it's the Onion Man at the top of their voice." So that hit me then. That was the first time ever. And
Wow.
It's yes, so yes, it's noticeable, but I mean, I was told at the start of my career, don't write books, they're a waste of time.
Yeah,
And yet, if I look at what's got me every job interview, it's a
yeah,
book. It hasn't got
mm,
me the job, but it's certainly got me an interview. And that's what's got me noticed. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and I don't think I'll
absolutely.
ever have more impact than writing that textbook.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, I have the similar story of meeting you for the first time in a conference, actually, the British Academy of Management,
Mm,
where we met. And I said, somebody told me this is Mark Saunders. And I said, is it the same Mark Saunders, the book Mark Saunders? And they
yeah.
said, yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So, yeah, I think, and it's not only me or that person you met recently. There's so
Mm,
many more people who would have
And
similar, yeah,
it's certainly, I mean, the book certainly opened a lot of doors, and it's been amazing to do it.
yeah,
But it's also
sure.
meant I can get ideas out, I mean, as well to people, which you can't
Yeah,
necessarily do so well.
yeah, sure. So,
Mhm.
so since now so many people look up to you, who has been a major influence to you or like your mentor?
I I thought of that one because I know you said you were going to ask that question, and I thought if I mention some people, I'll miss out some other people. So
Yeah.
what I'm going to do, and I've prepared this bit. I apologise,
Okay.
but this is the one thing I prepared quite carefully because I think
Okay.
it's. I'm not going to mention people, but
Okay.
a few years, no, this year actually came out a book on doing academic careers differently, which was edited by Alexander Bristow, Sarah Robinson, and Oliver Rattle. And I did a chapter in that on what I'd done in my career. I called it an academic pebble skip because I sort of have ideas and they bounce around. And
Yeah.
in that I put I wrote the acknowledgements there because I think this sums it much better than naming people. And I'll read it out because it's best.
Yeah.
My pebble skimming would not have happened in this way without the caring criticism, love, and warmth of colleagues, friends, and family. Each of you played an important part in my story, and yet, sadly, together you have become too many to name check. I hope you recognise in my tale, or in my career so far, as one of representation of heartfelt thanks for helping me to learn and grow into me, and your part in co-creating my career. So that's how I see it.
Right. Now, I
And
think it's a really, yeah.
I
Sorry.
don't think it's one person. I think there's been a lot of people who've been amazingly helpful. And some of those will have been the people who really annoyed me, but they've still been helpful.
Well, that's very honest of you to say that, but also I think it's such a great thing to hear from you that there have been so many people
Mm,
who have shaped up your career and your success as
yeah.
well. Of course, we're coming to the closing
Yeah.
of this podcast. So towards the end, has there any one book or a podcast or a reference point which has really influenced you, or perhaps which you would might like to recommend to the people watching this?
I'm not going to do the research methods book because it's too well known.
Yeah, yeah,
but
people know that about already.
but what I've been doing this year because person I met at a session for British Academy of Management said, have you got your own YouTube channel?" I said, "No, it's too difficult."
Yeah,
And Mohammed said to me, he said, "Mark," he said, I will show you how to do it. It's very easy." He said, "The
yeah.
deal is you have to come and give me a seminar."
Okay.
So Mohammed was brilliant in spending time with me doing it. So I'm going to say, I think the one resource I'd recommend, which is very, very naughty because I'm recommending myself, is
Okay.
I've got a YouTube channel called Mark Saunders on Research Methods, which
Right.
is little videos. Started off too long. They're now getting down to about 8 to 10 minutes, which is the right length, but it takes time
Yeah.
to learn these things. It's about
Yeah.
40 different videos on methods, and it gets a new one each week.
Right. Right.
So
Okay.
that's probably I would say the one that's
Yeah.
has met. But if I look at in doing research, and I think Don Dillman's book on the tailored design method of designing questionnaires, I learnt loads from that, and that was sort of like, wow, this is really exciting.
Right. Right.
Then if you look at the equivalent for qualitative work, it was Michael Quinn Patton's book on qualitative research design. That I
Mm,
learnt loads from
mm,
that.
mm.
I think Becker's book, Writing for Social Scientists, is the most beautiful book out on how to rewrite. Hence, that's where the idea of rewriting came from.
Right. Right.
Um,
Okay.
those are methods books. What I'm trying to think. What else? There's so many books I've read and enjoyed.
Yeah.
So um, let's think. Yeah, there was I think Mark Easterby Smith and Richard Thorpe and Andy Lowe's book on research methods inspired me because it didn't do what I wanted, so it forced me to write my own.
Right.
And I
Okay.
still think it's a great book. Don't get me wrong. And the latest version with Lena Jasperson taking lead on it is fantastic. I mean, they're doing wonderful work. So
Okay. Okay.
lots of books have inspired.
That's good to know. And also, it's really great to hear about your YouTube channel and the people who are watching. Do subscribe, to
Yeah.
the channel to learn more about research
Yeah.
methods. I also run my own YouTube channel with the name Dr. Samreen Ashraf. So do subscribe to that as well. Check that out if you find that interesting or useful. But just towards the end now,
Mm.
is there any last thing you would like to share with the people watching about your journey, and any kind of piece of advice, perhaps, if you will, to the
I'm
people watching?
I'm going to give two different pieces of advice. The first thing, I think it's still, despite everything going on in the world, it's probably the best job in the world you can have,
Right.
because we're working with lively minds and we can actually make people's lives better.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think it's up to us to do that. So I think we could just follow a career and aim for stars. I think if you aim to do brilliant research, teach well, the stars look after themselves. So that's the first
Yeah.
piece of advice.
Yeah. Sure.
And the second piece of advice is advice I give my younger colleagues, which I didn't do very well. And that is, if ever you think, should I spend time with my family or should I be working on the next paper, just go and take a walk around the graveyard. If you can find one gravestone which says she or he worked really hard on their papers, then you're doing the right thing.
Wow. Wow, that's such a, well, that's very deep to end this podcast with. And I think it's so also uh, worthy mentioning that, because
Mm,
many of us actually, in the pursuit of getting a next paper, next book chapter, next book,
mm.
next, oh, so many things, sometimes we forget
I
what
think
is more
I got
important.
it wrong, I'll be honest. I think I got it wrong. That's the biggest
Mm.
mistake I made.
Yeah, so I think, and hearing from somebody like you is a great reassuring thing for all of us who are listening to
Mm,
you, watching you also, to see how we can make things
mm,
better
mm.
going forward. But thank you so much for your time, Professor Saunders. This was lovely,
Thank you,
and actually,
Samir.
I have learned so much from you, and I really hope people who are watching us have also learned from you. So hopefully, we can do this again sometime. But for
Sounds
now,
good.
thank
Thank
you
you very
very
much,
much.
Samir.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
and I'll see you soon. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.